American Western films. Germans, well, naturally, they're the bad guy.
They said it was too big to film. Too many stars, too many tanks, too expensive to fail. A Bridge Too Far wasn't just a war movie, it was a battlefield behind the camera. One director tried to control the biggest cast ever assembled. Veterans showed up to relive their worst nightmares. And one explosion, it went so wrong, the crew thought they'd killed someone. These are 20 weird facts about A Bridge Too Far. And the bonus? A Hollywood legend who showed up drunk, stayed drunk, and still stole every scene. Lock and load. This mission gets dangerous fast. Before a single frame was shot, the budget terrified everyone in Hollywood. Producer Joseph E. Levine wanted to make the most expensive war film ever attempted. He committed $25 million in 1977 money, which equals roughly $125 million today. The studio panicked. They said no audience would sit through a 3-hour defeat story. World War II films were dying at the box office. Vietnam had soured America on military heroism. And this wasn't even an American victory. It was a British-led disaster. But Levine didn't care about trends. He cared about scale. He wanted real tanks, real paratroopers, real locations across Holland. He wanted thousands of extras, working vintage equipment, and bridges rebuilt to period specifications. The accountants did the math and predicted catastrophe. They told him to cut the budget, shrink the cast, shoot on backlots. Levine refused. He mortgaged everything, burned through his own fortune, and bet his entire legacy on one film. When production finally began, the crew realized something terrifying. There was no safety net, no studio bailout. If this movie failed, it would bankrupt everyone involved. And that fear, it haunted every single day of filming. Richard Attenborough didn't just direct A Bridge Too Far. He conducted an orchestra of egos. The cast list reads like a Hollywood phone book. Sean Connery, Michael Caine, Anthony Hopkins, Robert Redford, Gene Hackman, James Caan, Laurence Olivier, Dirk Bogard, Elliott Gould, Ryan O'Neal, Maximilian Schell, Liv Ullmann, 15 major stars. Most of them had never worked together. Many actively disliked each other. Attenborough knew this would be a nightmare. So before filming began, he made one brilliant decision. He refused to give anyone top billing. Every actor received equal screen time in the credits, equal pay brackets, equal trailer sizes. It was the only way to prevent mutiny. But even with those rules, chaos erupted. Some actors demanded script changes. Others rewrote their own dialogue. A few showed up late. Some left early. Caine and Connery barely spoke off camera. Redford kept to himself completely. And through it all, Attenborough smiled, nodded, and kept everyone moving forward. He later admitted the hardest part wasn't directing the battle scenes. It was making 15 massive egos believe they were all equally important. Because in war, rank matters. But on this set, everyone thought they were the general.
Starring Dirk Bogard, James Caan, Michael Caine.
The casting of Robert Redford caused a near revolt. In the real Operation Market Garden, Major Julian Cook was a tough, experienced American officer who led a desperate river crossing under fire. The veterans who survived that mission remembered him as gritty, weathered, and scarred by combat. Then Hollywood cast Robert Redford. Golden hair, perfect teeth, movie star looks. The veterans were furious. They said it was an insult. Cook wasn't a pretty boy. He was a warrior, but Attenborough had a problem. The film needed American box office appeal. Without a major U.S. star, the movie would tank stateside. Redford was bankable. He was hot off the Sting and All the President's Men. His name alone could open the film. So, Attenborough made a compromise. He'd cast Redford, but he'd make him earn it. No glamour shots, no hero lighting. Cook would be shown exhausted, terrified, covered in mud and blood. Redford agreed. He trained with military advisors, lost weight, and demanded to do his own stunts during the river crossing sequence. When the veterans finally saw the finished film, some admitted Redford had pulled it off. Not because he looked like Cook, but because he'd captured the fear. And in war, fear is the only thing that's universal.
They said, we've been here 9.
They didn't build a set. They rebuilt history. The production designers traveled across Holland, tracking down the actual locations of Operation Market Garden. The bridge at Arnhem, the drop zones near Nijmegen, the farmhouses, roads, and fields where men had died. Some buildings were still standing from 1944. Others had been demolished decades earlier. So the crew did something insane. They reconstructed entire sections of wartime Holland using period photographs, survivor testimony, and archived German documents. They rebuilt the Arnhem Bridge to exact 1944 specifications. They planted crops that matched the season. They even repainted buildings in historically accurate colors that no longer existed. The Dutch locals were stunned. Some of them had lived through the battle. They walked onto the reconstructed sets and wept. Because for the first time in 33 years, they were back in September 1944. Children who'd hidden in cellars now saw their childhood homes exactly as they'd been during the invasion. Veterans touched walls they'd fought behind. One old woman stood in front of a recreated bakery and said she could smell the bread her mother used to bake. It wasn't just filmmaking, it was resurrection. And everyone involved knew they weren't making a movie. They were building a memorial. Laurence Olivier was dying, and everyone knew it. The legendary actor had been battling illness for years. He could barely walk. His voice had weakened. Some days he couldn't remember his lines. But when Attenborough offered him the role of Dr. Sponder, a Dutch surgeon caught in the battle, Olivier said yes immediately. Not because he needed the money, not because he needed another credit, because he wanted one more chance to act. His scenes were minimal, just a few minutes of screen time. But Olivier treated every moment like it was Shakespeare. He rehearsed obsessively. He studied medical procedures. He interviewed Dutch doctors who'd worked during the occupation. And when the cameras rolled, something magical happened. The old man who could barely stand transformed into a physician, moving through chaos with calm precision. The crew fell silent watching him work. Between takes, he'd collapse into a chair, breathing heavily, visibly exhausted. Then someone would call action, and he'd rise again, fully alive. Attenborough later said, directing Olivier in those scenes was like watching a ghost refuse to leave. The performance wasn't just acting, it was defiance. One final stand against the end. And when Olivier finally wrapped his last shot, he smiled at Attenborough and whispered, "Thank you for letting me be useful one more time." The paratroopers weren't actors, they were soldiers. Attenborough insisted on using real military personnel for the massive airborne sequences. The British Army provided over 1,000 paratroopers. The production rented actual C-47 transport planes, the same models used in 1944. And then they did something unprecedented. They made the actors jump, not from planes, but from rigged platforms 15 feet in the air, while wearing full paratrooper gear. Caine, Connery, Hopkins, all of them trained with real airborne instructors. They learned how to pack chutes, execute proper landing rolls, and move under fire. Some actors loved it, others were terrified. Anthony Hopkins reportedly threw up before his first jump rehearsal, but Attenborough gave them no choice. If you wanted authenticity, you had to feel it. The real paratroopers watched Hollywood stars struggling with harnesses, tangling in suspension lines, face-planting into Dutch mud. And slowly, something shifted. The soldiers stopped seeing actors. They started seeing men trying to understand what their fathers and grandfathers had endured. One veteran paratrooper, who'd actually jumped into Arnhem in 1944, stood beside Sean Connery during a break. He looked at the actor's bruised face and said quietly, "Now you know. We were all just as scared as you." Connery never forgot it.
Those American Western films.
The bridge explosion almost killed the entire crew. During the climactic destruction of the Arnhem Bridge, the special effects team rigged the largest controlled explosion ever filmed in Europe up to that point. 50 pounds of TNT packed into strategic points. Cameras positioned at multiple angles. The shot had to be perfect because there'd be no second take. You can't rebuild a bridge twice. Attenborough ordered everyone back to a safe distance. The effects coordinator did a final check. 3, 2, 1, detonation. Except the blast was bigger than calculated. Way bigger. The shockwave hit like a physical wall. Windows shattered in buildings 200 yards away. The camera closest to the bridge got blown completely off its mount. Debris rained down for what felt like minutes. And for about 10 seconds, nobody moved. Everyone thought someone had died. Then slowly the crew started standing up, checking themselves, looking around in shock. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured, just ringing ears, minor cuts, and absolute terror. Attenborough stood there, covered in dust, and calmly said, "Did we get it?" The camera operator checked his equipment. Somehow, against all odds, the shot was perfect. They'd captured the bridge's destruction in devastating detail. One take, one explosion, one near disaster that became one of the most spectacular sequences in war film history. Gene Hackman and Ryan O'Neal hated each other, and it showed. The two actors were cast as American generals, but off-camera, they could barely maintain professional courtesy. The conflict started small, different acting methods, different work ethics, different personalities, but it escalated fast. During one scene, they were supposed to argue about military strategy. The dialogue was written, rehearsed, blocked. But when the cameras rolled, the argument became real. Lines were changed on the spot. Both actors started improvising insults that cut deeper than the script intended. Attenborough watched through the monitor, unsure whether to call cut or let it play. The tension was electric. When the scene ended, both men walked off set in opposite directions without speaking. The crew whispered. Some took sides. The atmosphere became toxic. But here's the strange part. When audiences saw the film, that scene crackled with authenticity. Because it wasn't acting. It was two men genuinely at odds, barely containing their contempt. And in a movie about military egos clashing during a doomed operation, that real friction added a layer of truth that no amount of skillful acting could have achieved. Sometimes the best performances aren't performed at all. They're just real life bleeding through the camera lens, ugly and honest and completely unscripted. The veterans didn't just consult, they invaded. Dozens of men who'd actually fought in Operation Market Garden showed up to the set uninvited. Some came to watch, others came to correct, a few came to confront. Because to them, this wasn't entertainment, this was their nightmare being replayed. One veteran walked up to Attenborough during the filming of the Arnhem Street fighting and said flatly, "You've got the smoke wrong, it was thicker. You couldn't see 5 feet. Another pointed at the extras playing dead soldiers and said, "They're lying too peacefully. The real bodies were twisted, broken." Some corrections were small, the angle of a rifle, the sound of German artillery, but others cut deep. During a scene depicting British soldiers surrendering after the battle's collapse, one old paratrooper started crying. Not quietly, he sobbed openly, standing behind the cameras, watching young actors recreate the worst moment of his life. Attenborough stopped filming. The entire crew fell silent. The veteran apologized, tried to leave, but Attenborough brought him closer. He asked the man to describe exactly what he remembered, how it felt, what he saw. The veteran spoke for 20 minutes, and everyone listened. When filming resumed, Attenborough quietly changed the blocking based on what he'd heard, because this movie wasn't his story to tell. It belonged to the men who'd lived it, and they were watching. Michael Caine showed up hungover every single day, and somehow turned in one of his best performances. His role as Lieutenant Colonel J.O.E. Vandeleur required him to be sharp, commanding, and perpetually exhausted, which worked perfectly because Caine was perpetually exhausted. He'd party until 3 a.m., sleep for 2 hours, then show up to set looking exactly like a man who'd been fighting a losing battle for days. Attenborough noticed but said nothing, because Caine's bleary-eyed, worn-down appearance was precisely what the character needed. During one scene, Caine was supposed to deliver a rousing speech to his men before a tank assault. He stumbled through the first take, forgot lines on the second, and on the third, just spoke from pure instinct. No script, no preparation, just raw exhaustion and frustration pouring out. Attenborough kept it. That improvised moment became one of the film's most powerful scenes because it felt real. A tired officer trying to inspire even more tired soldiers. After the film wrapped, someone asked Caine how he'd managed to look so authentically war-weary throughout. He laughed and said, "I wasn't acting, I was surviving." In a movie filled with method actors and military precision, Caine's accidental approach accidentally captured something true. War isn't glamorous, it's grinding. And sometimes the best way to play exhausted is to actually be exhausted. The Dutch weather became the production's worst enemy. Attenborough scheduled the shoot for late summer, assuming they'd get mild conditions similar to September 1944. Instead, they got biblical rain. Day after day, Torrential downpours turned the carefully recreated battlefields into swamps. Vintage tanks got stuck in mud up to their treads. Cameras had to be wrapped in plastic. Actors stood in trenches filling with water, trying to deliver lines while hypothermia set in. The schedule collapsed. What should have taken 6 weeks stretched to 4 months. The budget hemorrhaged money. Hotel costs, equipment rentals, thousands of extras sitting idle waiting for clear skies. Insurance companies started calling. The studio demanded Attenborough cut scenes, move to indoor sets, finish the film. He refused, because Operation Market Garden had been fought in terrible weather. The rain had turned roads to mud, grounded supply planes, made everything harder. If he shot in sunshine, he'd be lying. So they waited, and waited. Some days they got 2 hours of usable light. Other days, nothing. The crew grew restless. Actors complained. But Attenborough held firm. And when you watch the film, you can feel it. The cold, the wet, the misery. That wasn't movie magic. That was real suffering captured on film. Because sometimes the only way to honor history is to endure a small fraction of what those men endured. Dirk Bogard wasn't acting during his breakdown scene. The British actor had served in World War II. He'd seen combat. He'd lost friends. And when he signed on to play Lieutenant General Frederick Browning, he thought he'd made peace with those memories. He was wrong. There's a pivotal scene where Browning realizes the operation has failed. Thousands of men are trapped. More will die. And it's partially his fault. Attenborough called action. Bogard stood there, looking at casualty reports, and something inside him cracked. The tears weren't scripted. The shaking hands weren't planned. He wasn't playing a general having a breakdown. He was having one. The crew watched in stunned silence as Bogard went somewhere else entirely. Back to 1944. Back to real deaths. Real guilt. When Attenborough finally called cut, Bogard couldn't stop crying. He stood there for 5 minutes, unable to move, unable to speak. No one approached him. They just gave him space. Eventually, he walked off set alone and didn't return for 2 days. When he came back, he apologized to no one and never discussed what happened. But Attenborough kept the take, every raw second, because Bogard had given him something no direction could achieve: real pain, real regret, real war reaching across 33 years to claim one more casualty, even if just for a moment. The tank battle wasn't choreographed. It was barely controlled chaos. The production rented 11 working Sherman tanks and 16 German vehicles from collectors and military museums across Europe. These weren't props. They were 30-ton war machines with live engines and working treads. The plan was simple: drive them down a Dutch road in formation while cameras captured the advance. But nobody accounted for the fact that these tanks were decades old, temperamental, and driven by stunt drivers who'd never operated armor before. On the first take, one Sherman's brakes failed. It veered off the road, crashed through a fence, and nearly flattened a camera crew. On the second take, a German Panther replica stalled in the middle of the road. The tanks behind it couldn't stop in time. Metal crunched, treads locked. 3 tanks ended up in a tangled mess that took 4 hours to separate. Attenborough watched from a distance, chain-smoking, wondering if anyone would survive this sequence. By the 5th take, the drivers had figured it out through trial and error. The tanks rolled forward in perfect formation, intimidating and unstoppable. But those first 4 attempts, pure disaster. The crew joked that they weren't filming a war movie. They were fighting an actual tank battle. And just like the real Operation Market Garden, nothing went according to plan. Robert Redford nearly drowned during the Wall River crossing, and the cameras kept rolling. The sequence depicting Major Cook's desperate assault across the river was one of the most challenging in the film. Real boats, real river, real current. Attenborough wanted authenticity, so he insisted on filming in the actual Wall River where the crossing had occurred. Redford trained for weeks. He learned to paddle, to handle the boats, to move in full gear. But training in a pool isn't the same as training in a river with unpredictable currents. During one take, Redford's boat capsized. He went under, weighed down by equipment, tangled in the boat's rigging. For about 10 seconds, he disappeared beneath the surface. The safety divers started moving, but before they could reach him, Redford surfaced, gasping, spitting water. Attenborough yelled, "Cut!" Medics rushed in, but Redford waved them off, caught his breath, and said, "Again." They ran the scene 5 more times. Each take, Redford pushed harder, went deeper into the fear, because he realized something during that moment underwater. The real soldiers who crossed this river weren't trained Hollywood actors with safety teams. They were just men, terrified, drowning under fire, and if he wanted to honor them, he had to taste that terror, so he did, again and again, until the scene felt true. Elliott Gould brought his own chaos to the production, and Attenborough loved it. Cast as Colonel Stout, Gould showed up to set with a completely different interpretation of his character than what was written. The script called for a by-the-book American officer. Gould played him as a cynical, exhausted pragmatist who'd seen too much bureaucracy and too much death. He improvised constantly, changed lines, added dark humor where none existed. Some actors hated working with him. He'd throw them off their rhythm, force them to react in the moment. But Attenborough recognized what Gould was doing. He was injecting a dose of Vietnam-era disillusionment into a World War II film. Because audiences in 1977 weren't the same as audiences in 1944, they'd seen war differently, they questioned authority, and Gould's cynical officer spoke to that modern sensibility. During one scene, Gould was supposed to acknowledge an order and move on. Instead, he paused, looked directly at his superior, and said something completely off-script about the futility of the mission. The other actor froze. Attenborough almost called cut, but the tension was perfect. That moment of an officer questioning orders, that tiny crack in military discipline, it stayed in the film. Because even in the greatest generation's finest hour, men still doubted, they still questioned. They still wondered if any of it made sense. The film's premiere created an international incident. When A Bridge Too Far finally finished, Attenborough organized a massive premiere in the Netherlands. Royalty attended. Veterans from both sides were invited. It was meant to be a healing moment, a chance to honor the fallen and celebrate survival. But when the lights went down and the film began, tensions erupted. Some Dutch attendees were furious. They felt the film glamorized a battle that had destroyed their cities and killed their families. British veterans were angry that their heroism had been depicted as a doomed failure. American audiences didn't understand why the film focused so much on defeat. And the German veterans, they walked out. Because seeing themselves portrayed as the enemy, even accurately, was too much. After the screening, shouting matches broke out in the lobby. One British veteran confronted Attenborough directly, saying he'd betrayed the men who died. A Dutch survivor said the film didn't show enough civilian suffering. An American officer claimed it was anti-military propaganda. Attenborough stood in the center of it all, exhausted, devastated. He'd spent years trying to honor everyone, and instead, he'd satisfied no one. The reviews reflected the divided response. Some called it a masterpiece, others called it a betrayal. But here's the truth. War doesn't have heroes and villains. It has survivors and casualties. And Attenborough had committed the unforgivable sin of showing that complexity honestly. The budget overruns almost destroyed Joseph E. Levine financially. Remember that $25 million investment? It ballooned to nearly $27 million by the time cameras wrapped. In 1977 dollars, that was catastrophic. Levine had mortgaged his production company, borrowed against future earnings, and made deals with international distributors before the film was even edited. When early test screenings showed mixed results, panic set in. The film was too long, too depressing, too complicated for mainstream audiences. Studios wanted it cut down to 2 hours, remove subplots, add a hero, end with victory. Levine refused. He backed Attenborough completely. They'd made a 3-hour film about a 9-day battle, and they weren't going to butcher it to please focus groups. But that decision came with consequences. Some theater chains refused to book it. Others demanded profit-sharing deals that left Levine with pennies. The international rollout was a disaster. Language barriers, cultural differences, audiences in different countries blamed different nations for the failure. By the time the dust settled, A Bridge Too Far had earned back its budget, but barely. Levine never fully recovered financially. He'd bet everything on one massive throw of the dice. And while the film survived, his bank account didn't. Years later, someone asked if he regretted it. Levine smiled and said, not for a second. Some stories are worth going broke to tell. The film's most famous line wasn't in the original script. During a tense strategy meeting, Lieutenant General Frederick Browning expresses concern about the operation's complexity. Someone asks if it can be done, and Browning responds with what would become the film's defining quote about bridges and going too far. That line existed in Cornelius Ryan's book, but in early drafts of the screenplay, it was buried in exposition, just another piece of dialogue. Dirk Bogard read it during rehearsals and immediately recognized its power. He pushed Attenborough to build an entire scene around it. Make it a moment, give it weight. Attenborough resisted at first. Too on the nose, too obvious. But Bogard insisted. He understood something crucial. Audiences needed a thesis statement, something that explained not just what happened, but why it mattered. So they rewrote the scene, stripped away everything else, and let Bogard deliver the line with quiet, devastating certainty. When it came time to shoot, the set fell completely silent. Bogard spoke those words, and everyone knew. That was it. That was the film. Not the tanks or the stars or the explosions. Just one man recognizing a terrible truth and being powerless to stop it. The line became legendary, quoted in military academies, referenced in history books, all because one actor understood that sometimes the most important moment in a war film isn't the battle. It's the quiet realization that the battle is already lost. The final cut ran 3 hours and 15 minutes, and Attenborough fought for every second. Studio executives wanted him to trim it down, focus on the stars, cut the Dutch civilians, remove the German perspective, turn it into a traditional war picture with clear heroes and satisfying victories. Attenborough refused every single suggestion. He'd made a promise to the veterans, to the survivors, to history itself. This film would show the operation completely, not just the famous moments, but the forgotten ones. The medics working in destroyed buildings, the Dutch resistance fighters risking everything, the German commanders trapped between duty and humanity. Every subplot mattered. Every character had lived. To cut them would be to pretend they never existed. The battles in the editing room were brutal. Lawyers got involved. Contracts were reviewed. At one point, the studio threatened to take the film away from Attenborough and recut it themselves. Levine intervened, putting his own reputation on the line. The film would be released as Attenborough intended, or it wouldn't be released at all. The studio backed down. When A Bridge Too Far finally hit theaters at its full length, critics complained about the running time. Audiences struggled with the complexity, but the veterans understood, because war isn't a 2-hour experience. It's endless, and a 3-hour film was still too short to capture what they'd endured. After the film wrapped, the cast never reunited. Despite spending months together in Holland, enduring miserable weather and dangerous stunts, they scattered to different projects and never looked back. No cast reunions, no anniversary celebrations, just silence. Some of it was professional. These were massive stars with packed schedules, but some of it was something else. Making A Bridge Too Far had taken a toll. The combination of difficult conditions, clashing egos, and the emotional weight of the material had burned everyone out. Redford later said he needed years to decompress from the river crossing scenes. Caine joked that he'd drunk enough during production to last a lifetime. Bogard never spoke publicly about the film, except to say it was the hardest work he'd ever done. And Attenborough? He never directed another war film. When asked why, he'd simply say, "I'd said everything I needed to say about war. What would be the point of saying it again?" The film became a strange artifact, critically respected, but not beloved, financially successful, but not profitable, historically accurate, but dramatically frustrating. It didn't fit neatly into any category. It wasn't entertainment, it wasn't propaganda. It was just a brutal, honest depiction of a military failure. And in Hollywood, honesty doesn't always get celebrated. Sometimes it just gets quietly acknowledged, then filed away, never to be repeated. The actual bridge at Arnhem wasn't used in filming because it had been renamed. After the battle, the Dutch renamed it the John Frost Bridge, honoring the British commander who'd held it for 4 days against impossible odds. Attenborough wanted to film there. It would have been perfect symbolism, but there was a problem. The modern bridge looked nothing like the 1944 version. It had been rebuilt after the war with a completely different design. So the production team found another bridge 30 miles away that more closely matched the original structure. They dressed it, aged it, modified it until it looked exactly like wartime Arnhem. They filmed the entire climactic battle sequence there. Explosions, tank assaults, desperate last stands. And when it was over, they carefully restored the bridge to its original condition, leaving no trace they'd ever been there. But here's the strange part. After the film's release, tourists started showing up at the wrong bridge. They'd visit the John Frost Bridge in Arnhem, where the real battle happened, and be disappointed it didn't match the movie. Then they'd drive 30 miles to see the film location, which looked more authentic despite being completely fake. The real bridge honored the real heroes, but the fake bridge looked more like war. And maybe that's the perfect metaphor for a bridge too far. Sometimes the truth isn't as believable as the story, and sometimes the story is all we have left.